The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. I say used to, as if it was a long time ago. Truth is, I only really quit a couple of weeks ago for reasons that I think will soon be very obvious. I really don't think that there's any job more emblematic of how fucked up our society has become, sexually speaking, than the one I had. I mean, really. My job was to sex strangers who thought I was their favorite OnlyFans model. Some days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was part of some sort of scam, but no. As far as I knew, the company I worked for was completely legitimate, and everything I did was, again, as far as I could tell, completely legal. Dystopian as fuck. But legal. I guess my workday wasn't that rough, all things considered. It wasn't as easy as it probably sounds on paper, since there were certain quotas we needed to meet and all that jazz. But I got to work from home, often lying comfortably in my bed, and I could even work from my phone if required. All conversations were limited to a third-party application we were using, so it supposedly would have been extremely difficult for any of the people I was talking to get my personal information. Really, when you broke it down, what I was doing wasn't functionally all that different from online customer support. Only instead of helping a dissatisfied customer process their refund, I was helping some creeps with no social life jerk off and rating dick pics. My ratings were always based on how much of a creep they were, not on the actual size of the penis in question. I also wasn't just dealing with the customers of just one model. No, by the time I quit, I was sexting the clients of about 64 different models, with several of them being either male or trans. I am neither. And I'd like to think that I was pretty good at it. There's a certain level of skill to being a chatter. You can't just say anything to anyone. When you're chatting for a model, you've got to be able to impersonate them. You need to be able to copy their typing style and the little quirks they might have when texting. You need to know the little personal details they might have shared, or at least the details of the online persona they've created for themselves. Beyond that, you need to present yourself in a way that's going to play into the fantasy of the people texting that model while also staying on brand, as it were, and promoting additional content, dragging them deeper into the financial rabbit hole of a parasocial relationship. If a subscriber is texting Aria, an upbeat travel junkie whose content consists of 90% beach nudes about how much he hates his job at some factory, then Aria needs to direct the conversation away from his misery and toward how much she'd love to take him to her favorite lagoon on the beach for a romantic evening under the stars, and maybe suck his dick. Likewise, Cleo the financial dominatrix isn't going to have a lot of sympathy for people's sad stories about their shitty lives, and will be a lot colder to her subscribers. Every model I worked with had a drastically different persona, and I had to know them all. It actually kinda reminded me of my old online RP days, which had once upon a time been my go to escape from the mundanity of day-to-day life. Only this was mostly smut, as opposed to those old plot-driven RPs with only occasional smut in them, and I was getting paid to do it. Not that the pay was particularly great, mind you. Don't get me wrong, it was still paying the rent and I needed that. It's just that I would have preferred something a little less, well, dystopian. Still, I needed to take what I could get. Not a lot of places are particularly keen on hiring someone in a wheelchair. Sure, they say they'll make accommodations, but most places really don't mean it, so I had to take what I could get. Getting a job as an OnlyFans chatter isn't necessarily easy either. A lot of agencies hire their chatters from poorer countries, because of course they do. And even without that part of capitalism making it harder to find a job, I still had to jump through a lot of hoops and work with a lot of shadier agencies to get hired by the one I ended up working for near the end. I won't give out their name, but they were one of the agencies that worked with the more prestigious models. And yes, I did chat for some of said prestigious models, although never for any of the really big names. I think the biggest model I worked with was Lily, a girl who mostly filmed herself out dogging, engaging in public hookups with strangers, who were probably all pre-vetted and hand-picked to avoid any unnecessary risks. Honestly, despite the type of content the models I chatted for produced, a lot of the back and forth messages were relatively mundane. Some of them were comments on videos or photo sets that my models had shot that were fairly tame. "Hey Andy, just wanted to say that the bathtub video of you was really hot. 3. Call me strange if you want, but I always found those comments kinda wholesome, or at least as wholesome as you can get, when reaching out to someone about a video of them masturbating in the bathtub." I'd usually reply to them with a friendly but generic response, stuff like, "Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it," before trying to upsell them on another video or another tier of the subscription. A lot of the time, whoever was on the other side of the messages ate it right up. Then there were the cosplay requests, which were always popular with some of my female models. I usually forwarded those directly to the actual clients. A number of the popular requests even ended up as videos or photo shoots. Most depressing were the day-to-day DMs from lonely hearts who craved some kind of connection and had unfortunately chosen Femboy Feet 19 as the one to bare their soul too. I always felt a little bad for those people. Most of them did seem genuinely nice, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit guilty knowing that the model they thought they were building a parasocial relationship with didn't even know they existed. A lot of those chats did involve sexting, and I always felt a little guilty with those, knowing that I was playing these miserable people like a fiddle just to milk a few $100 extra out of their wallets. We were encouraged to mostly message the ones who paid, the ballers as some called them. The ones who didn't pay, brokies, got less attention and fewer messages. I always felt even worse for them, because they were usually just as obsessed with the models as the guys who had money, although I never felt bad enough to give them any extra time. Of course, among those lonely hearts were the really fucked up ones. The ones who just up and send the most mindlessly lust-fueled messages out of the blue, usually sharing whatever fantasy they'd had about that particular model. Some were pathetically mundane things like, "I want to tie you up and fuck you until you scream for daddy's cum." But the best ones were completely off the fucking wall. For example, one of my models, a queer camboy by the name of Luca, got a message from a man telling him he wanted to come in his boy pussy and make him boy pregnant. You really can't make this stuff up. Another time, I got a message for a different model, a trans girl by the name of Emily, about how badly the sender wanted her to fart in his mouth. I absolutely started howling with laughter when I read that one, wondering what kind of man would type that out, read it back and go, "Yes, this is what I want to send to the stranger that I pay to masturbate to." It wasn't just men who sent weird messages either. I got more than a few weird messages from some particularly interesting ladies too. One of them sent a PM to one of my male models, a hunky country boy by the name of Danny, about how she wanted him to spank my clit until I come to death. At no point in my life have I ever read anything less erotic, but it was still pretty funny to imagine someone typing that out in a fit of passion, and even funnier to imagine hunky country boy Danny actually reading something like that, considering 85% of his videos were him and his hunky country twink boyfriend Austin fucking the shit out of each other. Yeah, those bizarre messages always made my day, unlike the ones I sometimes saw from the more unhinged fans. The ones who seemed convinced that whatever model they were talking to was either genuinely in love with them, or would fall in love with them if they just gave a creep with stars in his eyes and more money than social skills a chance. Those messages tended to be disturbing on a lot of different levels. "Riley, I have done so much for you. I have supported your every video. I have joined your platinum tier. I am your top subscriber. I have stood by and tolerated your career, even though you have debased the temple that is your body with the cocks of countless other men. I only ask that you please meet with me, so I can show you my love is genuine. Stuff like that, which was probably intended as a desperate plea for the love of a porn star who brazenly marketed herself as a financial dominatrix, which I really just don't get the appeal of, but came off as one of the final messages said porn star would read before she was pulled into the back of a windowless van and never heard from again. Those messages I just straight up didn't reply to. When someone got too creepy, I just stopped talking to them. Sometimes they'd pop up again with an alternative account, but that wasn't anything that ignoring them further couldn't fix. Sooner or later they usually got the message, and I don't think their beloved models missed them all that much. My point behind this entire tangent is, I dealt with all sorts while doing this job, from the mundane to the creepy. After 2.5 years of working with a rotating list of clients, I was pretty sure there wasn't much anyone could send me that would surprise me. Do I need to tell you that I was wrong, or did you figure that part out all by yourself? I'd been responding to the messages for a client who I'll call Alicia when I got the first message. Alicia mostly did cosplay, and had recently uploaded a sort of Victorian steampunk set that might have been inspired by some video game. Either way, she'd been getting a lot of messages about that, and I'd been sorting through them, sending simple responses to most of them and ignoring the particularly gross ones. When I first saw the message, I almost glossed over it since by itself. It was relatively tame. It had come from an account called Don Juan Triumphant, and simply read, "I love you, Amy." I'd been half reading messages for a few hours by that point, so I didn't register the fact that it was my name they'd used. Not Alicia's until after I'd sent my reply of 3. Then, once the content of that message finally hit me, I froze. I read it again. "I love you, Amy." Why the fuck did this message use my name? Maybe whoever had sent it was confused. Alicia and Amy were sort of similar, right? I mean, both of them began with the letter A. Maybe that was it? Maybe it was just a simple mistake. That thought didn't do much to chase away the ominous sinking feeling in my gut, but I still tried to move on. None of the other messages I read for Alicia that day used my name, so it was easy to lie to myself and say that it had just been an honest typo. Alicia, Amy, both names began with A. Similar enough, easy to mix up. Don Juan Triumphant never replied while I was logged into that account, and I admittedly had moved on to another account before I could see any other replies. As a rule, I hopped between accounts several times a day, clearing out the inbox quickly and sending off my messages as quickly as possible, barely even thinking about them as I did. It was more time efficient not to spend a lot of time dwelling on the messages I sent unless I needed to. So I didn't. There was nothing particularly out of sorts in the next account, which belonged to the two hunky country boys. And after reading a fucking unhinged message from a woman asking if they would be willing to become her unvaxxed Aryan sperm donors, and I quickly forgot about the possible Alicia-Amy mix-up, I took a screenshot for my Hall of Fame and had myself a good laugh at the message, which of course specified that the donation needed to be a natural insemination, because I'm sure the fact that the monogamous hunky country boys were engaged to be married and frequently posted videos of them having hot gay sex gave a strong impression that they were open to naturally inseminating some random woman. The next account was unremarkable, as was the next. The mix-up faded into the back of my mind, and at the end of the day, I finally closed my laptop and enjoyed a nice, peaceful evening playing Pokemon without a single thought in my head about that message. It was a day or so later that I came across the second message from Don Juan Triumphant. I was going through one of my more interesting inboxes when I saw it. This one belonged to a moderately controversial model who went by Texas Grace, who'd been growing in popularity ever since some American pastor with a YouTube channel had singled her out as the latest sign that the West had fallen. Her gimmick was a little bit of a weird twist on those tradwife influencers. where her SFW content featured her shooting guns in plain sundresses that showed off a little too much cleavage, and her less family-friendly content featured her husband watching other men go to town on her. Apparently, some people had considered her content to be a mockery of their personal values, and she'd been milking that attention for all it was worth. Literally, in some cases, since a video she'd posted of her making breast milk ice cream had damn near doubled her popularity. I'm going to be completely honest, I actually found her content to be a little disgusting. Her country-fried online persona could be fun to write, but the fantasies her content fed into could at times only be described as too much. I guess it had netted her a lot of fans, but for every message she got from a subscriber begging for the chance to fuck her, there was another from some sanctimonious incel talking about how she was just proof that all women were serpents, and about how men like her husband are innocent creatures in a world full of perverse women like her who used and defiled them. It was some genuinely pathetic shit, and I could almost see the sweaty creeps who'd sent those messages seething at their keyboards because they couldn't admit that the real reason they were so upset is because someone in the world was having sex, and it wasn't them. I never really dignified any of those messages with a reply. Giving those kinds of people any attention was just going to empower them further, and I'd gotten to the point where I was only skimming them before deleting them, not even giving them the privilege of being read. I'd actually gotten into a comfortable flow when the message from Don Juan Truinfant popped up, and it was buried in among the mad influx of new DMs, so just like before I almost responded to it without thinking. I just read the first 3 words and was about to type something like, "Oh, thank you, honey," when I noticed my name at the end. "I love you, Amy." Suddenly, the comfortable flow I'd been in screeched to a halt. I found myself staring at the screen, at my name, and I just frowned, unsure what to do, what to think, how to even proceed. I just sat there in silence, my mind barely functioning as I stared at those 3 letters on the screen. Amy. This was not a simple mistake. This may be a surprise to some people, but Grace and Amy were very different fucking names. Someone knew I was answering Grace's messages and had left this there for me. They'd known I'd been answering Alicia's messages too. I recognized the name. I recognized it because I remembered wondering if it was some sort of reference to the Phantom of the Opera. I didn't know what to do, and it took me longer than it should have for me to realize that I probably needed to screenshot this. Once I'd taken the screenshot, I had the bright idea to go back into Alicia's profile to see if I couldn't find the message from Don Juan Triumphant there too. It didn't take me long. I even saw the reply that had been sent to the single thoughtless heart I'd given as a reply. "I can't wait to make you mine 3. I'd screenshotted that too, and immediately drafted an email to my supervisor, Jen. During my limited interactions with her, Jen had struck me as fairly reasonable and level-headed. She had a no-nonsense attitude, but was still pretty easy to talk to. I figured she'd probably sort this out, and to my relief, she got back to me immediately and asked if I was available to take a call from her. I told her I was, and my phone rang a few minutes later. I don't actually remember much about the conversation we had. I know that I told her what I'd seen, and that I'd told her which accounts it had been on. She promised me she'd look into it, before telling me to log out of both Grace and Alicia's accounts. She didn't tell me if she'd be giving them to someone else or handling them personally, and I didn't really care enough to ask. I was just happy that she seemed to have my back. She even said I could take the rest of the day off if I needed to, but I assured her I could keep working. I mostly only did it for the money, but part of me also wanted to shrug all of this off and get back to normal as soon as possible. After our call, I took around a half hour to calm myself down before logging into a different, less busy account to ease myself back into my flow. The one I ended up picking belonged to a model named Lilith. I actually kinda liked her profile a little bit. She had more of a witchy divided by gothic aesthetic to her, which I personally kinda dug. Chatting with her subscribers was always interesting too, since her persona was generally pretty fun to write as. She had recently taken to riding Grace's coattails a little, which had drawn the attention of the sanctimonious crowd. They'd been especially pissed off by a video she'd posted in response to some offended mother talking about how masturbation was a form of witchcraft, which depicted a compilation of her masturbating while that text flashed over the screen. Masturbation is a form of witchcraft. Actually, that video was kinda hot. The mismatched striped thigh highs she was wearing in one of the clips were really cute on her, and the fishnets she was wearing in a few of the others just looked good. No. Hey, just because I work behind the counter at the candy store doesn't mean I can't admire the merchandise. Right. Anyway, chatting with some of her subscribers did help me get my mind off of things a little. A few of the more depraved ones even gave me a slight laugh that lifted my spirits a little bit, but by the time I saw the message again, I still hadn't quite forgotten the deep unease that seeing my own name on the screen had instilled in me. And the moment I read that username, Don Juan Triumphant, the quiet dread came flooding back. I flagged Jen again, screenshotted the message, and moved on to another account while she took me off of Lilith's account. The next one I went to belonged to a self-declared femboy by the name of Joey, who typically posted anything from solo masturbation videos to full-on gangbangs. He was admittedly one of my least interesting clients, but as a result of that, most of his subscribers didn't send anything too out there either. This time, I didn't even get the opportunity to fall into any sort of rhythm with the work. It took less than an hour for me to see a message from Don Juan Triumphant, and it was the exact same message I'd seen everywhere else. I love you, Amy. After that, I couldn't keep going. I reported it to Jen, then logged off, closed my laptop, and told myself that I wasn't going to so much as think about work for the rest of the day. I still did. I still felt an uneasy weight hanging over my head, one that I couldn't quite shake off. A quiet dread over what would happen when I logged back in. I started wondering how this could have all been my own fault. Had I made some sort of mistake with one of the subscribers? Accidentally revealed something about myself? I didn't actually recognize the name Don Juan Triumphant, but I also chatted with so many random people that there was no way I could ever hope to remember all of their names. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, but couldn't downsy off, my mind racing with endless what-ifs. I eventually pulled myself out of bed, got into my wheelchair and went out into the living room to put on some mindless TV to try and take my mind off of things, but it didn't do me any good. When it was time to log in for work the next morning, I was running on zero sleep. I had a call with Jen first thing in the morning. She told me that she was still looking into the matter and hadn't yet figured out how this Don Juan Triumphant had gotten my name, or how he knew which profiles I was working on. She told me that her working theory was that it was some sort of prank from someone else on the team, which admittedly would have explained a lot. How they knew my name, how they knew which models I was assigned to, and how they knew when to send the messages so that I'd be the one to find them, as opposed to any of the other chatters who were assigned to those models. But neither she nor I could figure out who would want to pull a prank that messed up on me, or even why. It's not like our company culture was all that close-knit. I'd only ever spoken to a handful of other chatters, and none of us exactly had much of a relationship. For as practical an answer as it was, the prank theory didn't make a lot of sense, and so it did little to set my mind at ease. Still, Jen assured me that she was doing everything she could and told me to show her any other odd messages I received that day. I promised I would, and it wasn't even a half hour later that I was messaging her with the first of the day. It was on one of my lower traffic models, a girl by the name of Samantha, who got most of her money from live streaming. She was one of those girls who played video games in revealing outfits, with her most popular streams having a dedicated foot camera, although there really wasn't much to her beyond that. She only had about 4 or 5 dedicated subscribers, and Don Juan Triumphant's message had stood out from the usual crowd like a sore thumb. The same message as always. I knew then that he wasn't going to leave me alone, no matter how many times I reported it to Jen. I still tried, but I knew. On the channels of cosplay girls, twinks, dominatrixes, exhibitionists, he was always there, and as the next few hours went on, the frequency of my messages to Jen grew, screen cap after screen cap after screen cap, each one leaving me feeling more and more paranoid and uncomfortable in my own skin. I found myself glancing around, expecting to see someone watching me and dreading the moment the next message came in, and it always did come in. Always. Eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore. I'd been on the profile of one of my weirder models, if you could call it a model. It was technically just fan art of someone's furry OC, although the messages it got from its subscribers were usually entertaining. Most of them sent their messages in character as their personas, trying to RP with the illustrious Hulda, the sexy anthro wildebeest, who looked as if someone had experienced a very specific awakening while watching a particular tale as old as time from the Disney Renaissance. I suppose to the artist's credit, Hulda was reasonably sexy. The anthro aspect was a turn-off for me, but I could clearly see why she appealed to a certain group of people, which feels like a more roundabout way of saying I'm not a furry, but I digress. I almost dreaded logging into Hulda's account, since I already knew what was waiting for me and felt almost sad to know that I'd soon be saying goodbye to her too. Chatting with her fans had always been strange, but fun, and while I waited for the inevitable, I did exchange a few messages with some of them, typing out in character replies that felt bizarrely nostalgic. I'd been in the middle of a riveting, completely non-sexual conversation with Frankie the Wolf when I saw it, a new message from Don Juan Triumphant, and as soon as I saw that name, I felt my blood boil. Why was he doing this? Why was he stalking me? Why was he tormenting me? I couldn't take this anymore. I shouldn't have had to take this anymore. And before I could stop myself, before I could think or second-guess myself, I was typing my reply. I love you. Amy, his message read. Mine read, leave me the fuck alone northeast, you fucking psychopath. Followed by, message me again, and I'll fucking kill you. His reply came almost immediately. I can't wait to make you mine 3. I slammed my laptop shut and started to scream, tears streaming down my cheeks. I hurled my laptop onto my bed and knew I couldn't do this for 1 second more. Whoever was behind this sick prank, if indeed it was just a prank, had won. I was done. I called Jen a few minutes later, and I told her I needed to put in my resignation. She only sounded mildly surprised. Then, I left my laptop behind and rolled myself out onto my balcony to get some fresh air. If my legs still worked, I'd probably have tried to take a walk. But no, the balcony was as far as I could go. I sat a day in silence, staring out at the London skyline and watching as a light drizzle peppered the city. Despite the distant lights of other apartments, I still felt so indescribably alone. I felt like my world was burning down around me. It was just a job. I'd just quit one stupid, shitty little job where I was clearly being harassed. But now, new questions started to pop up. How would I pay the rent? How would I pay for food? I wasn't exactly rolling in savings. I needed that paycheck. And as I said before, most people didn't really want to hire a girl in a wheelchair. Maybe I could call Jen back, tell her I'd changed my mind. She'd probably understand, but that felt so much like admitting defeat. I was just so overwhelmed and didn't know what to do, and I was scared and I just couldn't handle it. So I stared out at the rain, and I didn't call Jen. The next several days were quiet. I'd logged out of everything related to my old job and started to finally close that chapter of my life. I didn't think about OnlyFans or porn. I just started looking for other work-from-home opportunities and even landed a single interview. I'd thought that this was a sign that things were going to be okay. I had enough money to coast for a month or so, give or take. It would be tight, but I could make it work. I'd find something new, have a fresh start, and look back at my time as an OnlyFans chatter with a chuckle a year or so later. The day of my interview, I'd set up my laptop in my home office and had set up my webcam. My hair was done nicely. I was wearing my best blouse and I felt ready to ace this. The interviewer logged on to the chat service. Although their webcam didn't turn on, the screen remained blank, although something about it had changed slightly. I'd called out hello, beginning the virtual dance of making sure everyone was connected that preceded every professional video call ever, and I heard only silence in response. Hello, I asked again, And that's when I heard it. A low, almost seductive voice, dripping with raw lust, speaking to me, saying my name. Amy. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I love you. Amy. The darkness on the screen seemed to shift and writhe, as if there was more to it than just black. For a moment, I was almost certain that the darkness was made of something, as if this was a video feed of several dark shapes, gyrating together, but I didn't allow myself to look for long enough to be sure. I slammed my laptop closed, my breathing heavy and panicked. I was on the verge of tears again. It hadn't stopped. Even after leaving my former job, it hadn't stopped. From where I'd placed it on my desk, my phone began to ring. It buzzed urgently on the wooden surface of the desk, and I looked over at it with a silent dread. Unknown caller. I knew who it was, deep in my bones. I knew. I threw the phone across the room, but it just kept on buzzing. 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 Even though no one else was around, and warm sunlight shone in through all of my windows, I couldn't help but feel an air of dread. I couldn't help but feel watched. I left my phone on the floor, refusing to touch it. The buzzing never stopped. I still heard it even when I'd left the room. I still felt eyes on me, even though there were none around. Not just watching eyes, either. This was something far worse. It was the feeling I used to get when I was a girl, and some lecherous creep felt the need to size me up. Their eyes traveling up my legs, lingering on my hips and chest, undressing me, reducing me down to nothing but fuckable parts. It was those kinds of eyes. If I could have left the apartment, I would have, but where could I really go? Wheeling myself out was possible, but making my way down the street would have been difficult. It's not like there was anybody I could call, and where would I even go? To visit a friend. What friends? To the police? Would they even believe me? What then? What else could I do but sit and try to think this through? I couldn't shake the feeling that a smarter mind than mine would have probably offered me some simple, pragmatic solution. Oh, why didn't you do X? You really should have just done Y. Obvious, really. But the simple, pragmatic solutions that everyone on the internet seems to already know are easy to miss when you're in the present moment, and helplessness takes hold of a person with disturbing speed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was simply waiting for the situation to get worse, and I suppose in a sense I was, because the fact of the matter was that I truly did not know what else to do. Eventually my phone ran out of battery, and all went silent. I left it on the floor. I didn't touch my laptop again either. I was too afraid of what would happen if I did. I did consider trying to leave the house, maybe getting a hotel, or something like that, but I simply didn't have the money for it. So instead, as night fell, I wheeled myself into my bedroom and hoisted myself up into bed, hoping that maybe sleeping would make it all better. I don't think I knew what was coming as I pulled the covers over myself, but I think I knew it had to be something. I don't remember how surprised I was when I woke up to my dead phone buzzing on my nightstand. The screen was facing up, but instead of the message I'd seen before, unknown caller, now it read, I love you. My heart skipped a beat, and I swept it off the bedside table, sending it tumbling into the space between the table and the wall. The buzzing didn't stop. I suddenly heard movement somewhere else in the apartment, coming from my office. I think, but I couldn't be sure, it could have really been coming from anywhere, and as I lay in bed, listening to whatever was in my apartment shuffle around, I heard it speak. I love you. Amy. The panic gripped me immediately. Something was in here with me, hunting me, and I did not want to know what it was going to do to me when it got to me. With arms shaking violently, I hoisted myself up, pulling my wheelchair closer to the bed as I clumsily fell into it. I was not very fast, but I tried to move as quickly as I could. Using one hand, gripped the wall and tried to pull myself forward a little faster as I tried to escape. The only place I could really go was out into the hallway. I didn't know how bad of an idea that was, but I also didn't have any other choices. As far as I could see in the darkness, the hall was clear, and trying to hide my panicked breathing, I rolled myself quickly into the living room, trying to make it to the front door. I almost made it, almost. Then I heard that low, whispering voice behind me. Am I? Something grabbed my wheelchair, and I felt something brush through my hair. I couldn't stop myself from screaming, and without a second thought, I threw myself out of my chair and onto the ground. Looking back, I only saw darkness as I dragged myself across the floor, looking for any salvation I could find. It was hard to say for sure exactly what I saw through my frightened tears, although I'm sure there had to be something more than just darkness. I'm sure of it. Whatever it was, the darkness behind me seemed to spread, creeping toward the front door to cut off my escape, and with nowhere else to go, I crawled toward the balcony. Amy, it crooned, and I heard something drawing closer to me, something in the darkness. Its voice oozed lust, and that lust filled me with a fear I've never felt before. The balcony door was so close, and thankfully unlocked. I was able to pull it open from the floor and begin dragging myself outside. The darkness seemed to grow behind me, and after I pulled my legs through the door, I gripped it tight and slid it closed, hoping in vain that it might stop whatever it was that was coming for me. I heard a dull thud as shapes were pressed against the glass, writhing human body parts, breasts, limbs, faces contorted in ecstasy, wild eyes fixated on me and grinning as if inviting me to join. Some of them I could have sworn I'd recognized as the faces of models I'd once worked for. Texas Grace, Lilith, Lily, Hunky Country Boys Danny and Austin, Amy, Amy, Amy. The voice, which now sounded like a chorus, chanted my name with an almost sexual urgency. The mass of writhing flesh pressed against the glass, and I saw cracks begin to form on its surface. I knew it would not hold, so I took the only escape I had. I grabbed the railing, I lifted myself over the balcony, and I let myself fall. The doctors say I'm lucky to still be alive. There was a rough patch there where I wasn't, but as of right now, I'm still ticking. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. The police found nothing in my home. No sign of forced entry, or that anyone or anything other than me had ever been there. I know they probably think I'm just crazy, and while I honestly hope they're right, I'm not sure they are. By my own request, I've never been entirely alone while I've been in the hospital. I'm currently sharing a room with a few other people, and so far nothing strange has happened, although I've also been making a point to limit the time I spend on my phone or my computer. I don't know how much difference it's made, but it makes me feel better. I can't stay in the hospital forever though. Sooner or later, I'll have to go home, and I don't know what's going to happen to me then. I can't help but notice that most of the old models I used to work for aren't posting anymore. None of them have really said why, but I can't help but wonder if I already know. I don't know what this is. I know it's hungry, lustful, insatiable, but that's it. Other than that, I don't think I can even begin to fathom it. I don't know what I did to get its attention, and I don't know if I'll ever really escape from it. I'm not sure if I can. My name's Sarah, and up until last year, I was just your average 28-year-old trying to figure out life. I had a decent job at a local bookstore, a tiny apartment that I shared with my cat, Mr. Whiskers, and a husband I loved more than anything in the world. Tom and I met in college. He was this goofy guy with messy brown hair and the kindest green eyes you've ever seen. We clicked right away, bonding over our shared love of bad horror movies and even worse puns. We got married 2 years after graduation in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. For 3 years, life was good. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but we were happy. We were talking about starting a family, maybe buying a house. You know, all those grown-up things you're supposed to do. But then last year, everything changed. It was a rainy Tuesday in October. Tom had gone out to grab some groceries. He was supposed to be back in time for us to watch the latest episode of our favorite show. I remember sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, wondering why he was taking so long. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there, their faces grim. My heart dropped before they even opened their mouths. I knew. Somehow, I just knew. "Mrs. Thompson?" one of them asked. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I'm sorry to inform you, but there's been an accident. The rest of that night is a blur. I remember bits and pieces. The officers telling me that a drunk driver had run a red light, hitting Tom's car, that he died instantly, that they were so sorry. I remember calling Tom's parents, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what happened. I remember my best friend, Lisa, rushing over and holding me as I sobbed until I had no tears left. The funeral was 3 days later. It was a beautiful service, I guess. People kept telling me how lovely it was, how Tom would have appreciated it. But honestly, I barely remember any of it. I was like a zombie, going through the motions, shaking hands and accepting hugs from people whose faces I couldn't even focus on. We buried Tom in Oakwood Cemetery, under a big oak tree. His tombstone was simple, just like he would have wanted. Thomas Thompson, beloved husband and son, 1995-2023. For months after, I was lost. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for Tom, only to find his side of the bed cold and empty. I'd catch myself picking up my phone to text him about something funny that happened at work, only to remember he wasn't there to read it. But slowly, painfully, I started to put my life back together. I went back to work. I started seeing a grief counselor. I even managed to smile again now and then. And then came the day that changed everything, again. It was the 1-year anniversary of Tom's death. October 15th, 2024. I decided to visit his grave, like I'd been doing every month since the funeral. It was a crisp autumn day, leaves crunching under my feet as I made my way through the cemetery. I brought flowers, sunflowers, Tom's favorite. As I approached his grave, I rehearsed in my head what I was going to say. It sounds silly, but I always felt like I was really talking to him when I visited. But when I got to the grave, the words died in my throat. I blinked, sure I must be seeing things. I rubbed my eyes, but the image didn't change. There on Tom's tombstone, right below his name, was mine. Sarah Thompson, 1995. The date of death was blank, but my name was there, clear as day, carved into the stone as if it had always been there. I dropped the flowers, my hands shaking. "What the hell?" I whispered, reaching out to touch the stone. It was real. The carving was there, under my fingertips. I looked around wildly, half expecting to see someone jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" But the cemetery was empty, silent, except for the rustling of leaves in the wind. I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it as I pulled it out of my pocket. With trembling fingers, I snapped a picture of the tombstone, then another, and another. "This can't be real," I muttered to myself. "This can't be happening." But it was, and little did I know, it was only the beginning. I'll post the next part soon. Writing this has brought it all back, and I need a minute to collect myself. But there's so much more to tell. God, I hope someone out there can help me make sense of this. After I found my name on Tom's tombstone, I kind of lost it. I mean, wouldn't you? I remember sitting on the ground next to his grave, my brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I must have been there for hours, because when I finally snapped out of it, the sun was setting. I stumbled home in a daze. As soon as I got in, I called Lisa. "Sarah, what's wrong?" she asked as soon as she picked up. I guess my voice gave me away. "Lisa, I need you to come over, please. Something's happened." She was at my door in 15 minutes. I showed her the pictures on my phone, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Sarah, this isn't possible." "I know," I said, my voice cracking. "But it's there, Lisa. I touched it. It's real." We spent the next few hours calling everyone we could think of. The cemetery office, closed for the day. The company that made Tom's headstone, also closed. Even the police, who basically told us that unless someone was actively trying to kill me, there wasn't much they could do. Lisa offered to stay the night, but I told her I'd be okay. Big mistake. As soon as she left, the apartment felt different. Colder somehow, like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't focus. Every little noise made me jump. Around midnight, I finally decided to try and get some sleep. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But as I was brushing my teeth, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps coming from the living room. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. It couldn't be Mr. Whiskers. He was curled up on my bed, and I lived alone. The footsteps got closer, slow, heavy steps, like someone was taking their time, knowing I had nowhere to run. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I looked around frantically for something, anything I could use as a weapon. I grabbed my hairdryer, not ideal, but better than nothing. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. I held my breath, gripping the hairdryer so tight my knuckles turned white. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, familiar, impossible. "Sarah?" It was Tom's voice. I dropped the hairdryer, the crash echoing in the tiny bathroom. This couldn't be happening. Tom was dead. I'd watched them lower his coffin into the ground. "Sarah, honey, are you okay?" The door handle started to turn. I backed up until I hit the wall, a scream building in my throat. The door swung open. There was nobody there. I stood there, shaking, for what felt like hours. Eventually, I managed to peek out into the hallway. Empty. The whole apartment was empty. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat on my bed, lights on, jumping at every little sound. When the sun finally came up, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. I called in sick to work and went straight to the cemetery. I had to see the tombstone again. Had to know if I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I got there, my heart nearly stopped. The tombstone was gone. In its place was a freshly dug hole, an open grave. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on something. I looked down and saw a shovel, a dirty, used shovel. And there, stuck to the handle, was a note, in handwriting I knew better than my own. "I'm coming home, Sarah, wait for me." I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, constantly looking over my shoulder. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror, a figure standing by Tom's empty grave, a figure with messy brown hair and familiar green eyes. I'm at Lisa's place now. I can't go back to my apartment. I don't know what to do. Am I going crazy? Is this really happening? And the worst part, a small, terrible part of me wants it to be real, wants Tom to really be coming back, even if he's not the same Tom I knew. God, what's happening to me? I'll update again when I can, if I can. Please, if anyone has any idea what's going on, help me. I'm scared. I'm so scared. Edit. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It's been 3 days since I last posted. 3 days of pure hell. But I promised I'd keep you updated. So here goes. After I fled to Lisa's place, things got worse. So much worse. That first night at Lisa's, I woke up screaming. In my dream. I was back in the cemetery. Tom was there, standing by his open grave. But he wasn't the Tom I remembered. His skin was pale, almost grey. His eyes, God, his eyes were empty. Black holes in his face. He reached out to me, his fingers elongated and twisted like tree roots. "Sarah," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "Why did you leave me?" I jolted awake. drenched in sweat. Lisa came running in, worry etched on her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then I saw it. There, on Lisa's bedroom wall, words dripping down the wallpaper like fresh blood. "I'm Washington iting for you, Sarah." I screamed. Lisa flicked on the lights, but as soon as they came on, the words vanished, gone like they'd never been there. Lisa thought I was losing it. Hell, I thought I was losing it, but I knew what I saw. The next day, things got even stranger. We went to the police station to file a report about the missing tombstone. The officer looked at us like we were crazy. He said, tapping away at his computer. "According to our records, there's no Thomas Thompson buried at Oakwood Cemetery." My jaw dropped. "What? No, that's impossible. I was just there. I've been visiting his grave for a year." The officer shrugged. "I'm sorry, but there's no record of it. Are you sure you have the right cemetery?" We left the station more confused than ever. On the drive back to Lisa's, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You can't hide from me. Sarah, I'm coming for you." I showed Lisa. She immediately turned the car around, heading back to the police station. But by the time we got there, the message had disappeared from my phone, like it had never existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom's face. Not the Tom I loved, but the thing from my dream. I Saturday in Lisa's guest room, lights on, jumping at every little sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, scratching, coming from inside the walls. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It got louder, more frantic, like something was trying to claw its way out. Then, a voice, Tom's voice, but wrong, distorted. "Sarah, let me in, Sarah." I backed into the corner of the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The scratching got louder and louder, and then the wall started to bulge. I watched in horror as the wallpaper stretched and tore. A hand pushed through, grey, decayed, with long, twisted fingers. I screamed. I screamed so loud I thought my throat would tear. Lisa came running in. The moment she opened the door, everything stopped. The hand disappeared. The wall was intact, like nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real. Lisa didn't believe me. How could she? It sounded insane. She suggested I see a doctor, maybe get some sleep medication. I nodded, agreed to whatever she said. But inside, I knew this wasn't in my head. This was real, and it was only getting worse. Yesterday, I went back to my apartment to grab some clothes. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. It was cold, so cold I could see my breath. And the smell, God, the smell, like wet earth and decay. I ran to my bedroom, grabbed whatever I could fit in a bag. As I was about to leave, I saw it, on my bed, a single red rose. And next to it, a note, "Till death do us part. Remember." I don't know what to do anymore. I can't sleep. I can't eat. Every shadow looks like him. Every noise sounds like his voice. And now I'm starting to wonder, what if I should let him in? What if this is my fault? For trying to move on? For not waiting for him? No, that's crazy talk. Right. I'm losing my mind. I know I am, but I also know this is real. Tom is coming back, and I don't think I can stop him. If anyone out there knows what's happening, please help me. Please. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. I'll try to update again, if I can, if I'm still here. God help me. I, 23F, have been in a wheelchair all my life. Or at least, it felt like it. My mom had told me that when I was young, maybe 6 or so, I had some accident in a lake nearby in Charleston, Texas, that left my lower half paralyzed. We had to move soon after because my dad found a new job up in New York that made a whole lot more money, according to him. I never understood why he would always harp on that, since it seemed obvious to me that anyone would switch jobs if they'd be given an upwards of 50% pay raise. Anyways, the whole point of that was just to say that I've moved back to Charleston, much to the chagrin of my parents who wanted me to stay close to them. I was able to scrape up enough money to buy a used car and gas to drive down there. I have ample mobility in my feet to drive, while also having enough to afford the down payment on a house there I was looking at online. Obviously, since I'm not able to spend too much time on my feet, I opted for a single-story house, which would also be a lot cheaper. When I arrived in Charleston, I headed over to the office to sign some paperwork regarding the house and whether or not I'd take out a mortgage. I rolled myself into the elevator and pressed 6. When the elevator doors began to close, I heard a voice call out, "Hey, hold the door for me." I stuck my foot between the doors and a large man came stumbling in. I don't mean to judge a person by their appearance, but quite frankly, he looked like the epitome of a deadbeat. His hair was unkempt, he reeked of sweat, and looked as if he hadn't bathed in days. What put me off the most, however, was his clean-shaven face that didn't fit the rest of his body. If you were to only look at his face, it'd seem like a grown baby. Regardless, I felt uncomfortable being in an elevator with him. His stench immediately made the air grow heavy right when he stepped in, and I felt disgusted with every breath I took. I almost felt bad for being so repulsed by a stranger I had known for less than 10 seconds, but his later actions would make me feel no more guilt. When the man walked into the elevator, he was in a bit of a daze. It only took him a few seconds, however, before he looked down and saw me. He smirked, and I swore I heard him chuckle too. Before the doors finally closed, he looked towards the shining 6 button. I could feel my heart sink when he pressed the buttons for every single floor before it. I wanted to close my eyes so bad, thinking he'd do something for me. Fortunately, it seemed all he wanted to do was talk. Unfortunately, he wanted to talk. "So where you from?" "Oh, just New York." I wanted to slap myself for telling him the truth. My parents taught me countless lessons in stranger danger, and I had already broken the most important rule. "New York, eh? Then you must be quite the big shot, huh?" The elevator reached floor 2. "No, not really. There's a lot of normal people there too." "I see. What's your name?" I caught myself, Samantha. The elevator reached floor 3. "That's a beautiful name." He thought about it for a second. "I like it, mine's Jerry." The elevator reached floor 4. "So you seem to be new here. It's a great town, but can be a bit dangerous, especially for a young lady such as yourself. It's important to have a man nearby." The elevator reached floor 5. He took out a piece of paper that appeared to be stained with coffee or something brown and wrote something on it. Then he folded the paper and tucked it into my shirt pocket, making no effort to avoid touching my chest. The elevator finally reached floor 6. I had never been more relieved to get out of a conversation before. I wheeled myself out of the elevator as fast as I could. I made sure not to look back. I could feel Jerry's gaze burning into the back of my neck. I don't know why, but I imagined he was smiling as well. It didn't take long for me to make my way to the agent's office. She greeted me with a smile, a lot more friendly than Jerry's sinister one. "Hi, Sarah, it's good to see you today." I was a bit startled to hear someone call my name out like that. Then I remembered I had to put my name on the application to have the meeting in the first place. I simply smiled and greeted her back. "It's good to meet you too." "Cheryl," she filled in. "It's good to meet you too, Cheryl." Cheryl looked to be in her late 50s. She had quite a few grey hairs here and there, as well as wrinkles. However, she still had more than enough youth left in her. She was quite excited to hand me all the forms and paperwork I needed to sign. She was even thoughtful enough to bring me a shorter table to sign everything on. Everything was done with a cheerful smile on her face. It was comforting. I was over 1,000 miles away from my old life, and I had just experienced one of the creepiest moments in my life so far. Having someone treat me like a child felt more reassuring than patronizing at that moment. When I finished filling out and signing everything, I found myself talking casually with her, maybe a bit too casually. "Thanks so much for the help, Mom." It took a while for me to realize what I just said, and I wish I didn't. I could feel my face getting red with embarrassment. Cheryl looked at me with a sympathetic look in her eyes. "Oh, babe, if you ever need a mama or a hug, you know where to find me." I nodded and left the office with a smile on my face. Before I left the room, I heard Cheryl call out, "Oh, and good luck." "Thanks." Didn't know what she was saying good luck for. I assumed it was a southern thing. I arrived at my house very late that night. The house looked a lot bigger than what it should have been, to the point I was worried I arrived at the wrong house. I tried using the house key I was given, and to my surprise, it worked. The interior of the house seemed to fit that of a single story. The ceiling was quite low, but it wouldn't be a problem, considering I wouldn't be standing very often. The first thing someone would see if they were to walk in would be a short hallway leading to a living room area. There was a kitchen to the left of the living room and a bedroom to the right. Connected to the bedroom was a relatively spacious bathroom. There were one or two other closets and a backyard as well. All the flooring was carpet besides the kitchen and bathroom. I didn't bring anything with me on my drive to Charleston besides a few snacks, drinks, and an air mattress. I would have to buy some furniture later. I changed my clothes, making sure to toss the piece of paper Jerry gave me, and plugged the inflating machine into an outlet and inserted its tip into the mattress. That's when I heard something strange. Thump. I thought I was imagining things, so I tried ignoring it. Thump. It sounded even louder this time. Thump. I turned off the inflator and listened more closely this time. It sounded like footsteps. That couldn't be right. It's a single-story house, and the sound came from what would have been upstairs. I decided to ignore the sound and continued inflating the mattress until it was full. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the thuds and thumping all throughout the night. I couldn't take it anymore. The noises pounded in my ear, and my heart raced every time I heard them. I kept having intrusive thoughts that maybe those sounds really were footsteps, which only put me further on edge. I got out of bed and wobbled around the house. My legs were weak, but I thought I'd be able to get around the house and find the source of my distress before my legs gave out on me. My first thought was that there was some kind of machinery or piping in the ceiling, but the sounds felt too irregular to be any of those. My second thought was an animal on the roof, maybe a raccoon or a possum, but the roofing tiles were ceramic and would have sounded more like a clang. Unfortunately, my mind was too tired to think any further than two reasons, so I looked around the house instead, hoping I'd see something that might explain something. My little search ended up leading to more questions than answers. I ended up going through almost every single space in the house. Almost. I remembered the online listing for the house saying there was a space made for a washer and dryer to be installed, but I didn't remember seeing it. The website said the room was connected to the bedroom, so I went back there. After a quick break on the mattress, I got back to searching. I wanted to sleep badly, but the thumping was keeping me up, and honestly, so was my curiosity. It only took a few minutes of active searching until I finally found it. There was no knob, but rather a hook that jutted only slightly out of the wall. No one would have been able to tell there was a door there if they didn't look closely enough to see the outline of one. The only reason I noticed it was because I cut myself on the hook after leaning on the wall to get some rest. I put my ear to the wall, and I knew I had solved the mystery. The sound was much louder there than anywhere else in the house. I gently gripped the hook. Before I could open the door, I felt a great sense of dread. It was as if my body was telling me that I shouldn't see what's behind the door. Looking back on it now, I should have listened. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. There was a set of stairs. What the hell? I was bewildered. There wasn't anything wrong with the stairs. It wasn't like it was covered in blood or anything. It was just a normal staircase made out of carpet. It's just the placement was so odd. I couldn't tell what was more strange, finding a set of stairs in a single-story house, or the fact that the stairs didn't lead anywhere. I'm serious. It didn't lead anywhere, just straight into the wall. It was like the builders thought they were building something else, realized their mistake, but were too lazy to take it down, and just covered it up. I even went up the stairs, thinking there was another secret hook, but nothing was there. What was even worse was that the noises persisted. At that point, I grew too tired and a bit scared to deal with whatever was happening. I closed the door and collapsed onto my bed. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind was running, attempting to understand the things that happened that day. But it couldn't. The worst part was that I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. I can't remember if it was part of a dream or I guess a nightmare. But when I rolled over in bed, I could see the stairs peeking from behind the door. The next few weeks went a lot better. I was able to purchase all my furniture and get it moved into the house. The house was starting to feel a lot more like a home. Sleeping became much better as well. Along with having an actual bed instead of an air mattress, the thumping stopped. I guessed opening the hook door released some air pressure in the room, which must have been circulating for who knows how long. I felt safe. That feeling would only last momentarily. It seemed to be a normal day. I was planning on going on a big grocery shopping trip since I received my first paycheck from my new job that allowed me to work from home. I opened the front door before I realized I forgot to grab my reserved parking permit. I locked the door before I started looking for it. Locking doors sort of became a habit for me since back where I lived in NYC. Not locking your door was an invitation for strangers to walk in, even if you were home. As I was shuffling through the drawer in the kitchen, that's when I heard it again. The thumping. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was so similar but felt different. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like someone was walking down a set of stairs. Thump, thump, thump. The sound suddenly got louder and I started getting scared. There was no logical explanation for my fear, but my instincts were telling me I needed to hide. I started panicking. The sound was getting louder and my wheelchair kept slipping on the kitchen tiles. I abandoned the wheelchair and crawled as fast as I could into the shoe closet, compressing my body so I could fit. Kriya! I heard a door open. Kriya! Another door opened. It sounded closer. I was terrified. I left my phone in the kitchen and had no other way to get help, and now someone, or something, was opening all the doors to my house. It was only a matter of time before they'd find me. I shut my eyes tight. I heard more doors open. Then I heard the kitchen sink turn on. Suddenly all the sounds stopped. I waited for a few more minutes before peeking out the closet door. I couldn't see anything. I took a deep breath and shoved the door open. There was nothing there. All the doors were closed, even the front door was still locked. I let out a loud laugh. I was all stressed for no reason. I stumbled out of the closet, grabbed my phone and parking tag, and sat down in my wheelchair, ready to leave. Before I went out, I took a quick glance behind me and my heart dropped. The kitchen faucet was still dripping. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time. May your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.